Okay, I want to take a moment to teach you about the difference between shrinking energy, puffing up energy, and then what is the happy medium, which is more like standing in your sacred ground. So, this is a concept that Brene Brown has talked about, and I sort of taken it to then put it through the lens of often the work that I do, which is also more somatic and noticing like your energy, your actual vibrational, physical energy, but it's also, of course, related to your mind and your attitude. And we all do this, by the way, which is why I think this is like a really helpful tool for you to come back into being more sovereign and clear, is because we all have moments where we will like shrink and we will all have moments where we will puff up, but noticing that puffing up actually is really the same thing as shrinking. The only reason we ever puff up is because we feel inadequate or insecure in some way, and so then we overcompensate. And if you are paying attention, you already know that this feels terrible, that your energy is bouncing around from one thing to the other, where you're either like in feeling small, or you're overcompensating by feeling big, and it feels like your energy is just ping-ponging around. And this is what I see in people who then are not confident, who feel frenetic, who's like, when I get around them, they can be like they might seem just like really anxious, really not in their bodies, right? And really like not peaceful. And so all of this, of course, is coming back to like how not it's like not only can we feel more not only how can we feel more inner peace, but it's like, how can we be more powerful, like in our own personal power, and like more empowered. And that's like a really good place to be. It's the place where I want more women specifically to live. Okay, so, and it's very simple. I hope by offering even this construct, you can begin to notice like, oh yeah, that is something that I'm doing. Just having language for like, oh, I'm shrinking or I'm puffing up. Shrinking, again, is just like, oh, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I don't have enough experience. No one's going to take me seriously. Who do I think I am? Super apologetic. And even I'm like doing this with my body language, because even if sometimes we will physically shrink, but even if you are not physically shrinking, your energy is shrinking. All of a sudden, it's just like, whoop, you just feel small, and you feel like you don't want people to like see you. And I mean, it can show up in a myriad of ways, but the reason this is helpful is because this practice can help you become intimately familiar with what energy in your body feels like. It can be a tool for you to start getting more connected with your physical being, which I see a lot of people needing more of, which is like living more in our bodies and getting familiar with how something feels in our body, rather than just like being in our head all the time. So shrinking, and I want you to think of an example of any time that you feel like you've shrunk. And again, this happens to all of us all the time. It can be like, maybe you're at a party where you feel awkward, maybe you feel inadequate in your job situation, maybe, okay, so like one of my clients recently was telling me that when she's with her husband, she tends to shrink. Like she doesn't like she feels like she's too extra and she has too many demands, and she doesn't want to be like a nag. And so she'll just like make herself smaller, and she'll feel like she doesn't know how to get her needs met. And then ironically, when she's with her children, she feels a puffing up. It's like this feeling of being like she needs to assert dominance, and she needs to be like strict, or that she needs to control. There's nothing, it's not about being strict. It's more like this need to assert and have control because she's feeling out of control. So then she like puffs up, which not surprisingly is not helpful for her, is not helping her in her interactions with her children, right? So again, that's like shrinking. And then I kind of jumped into this idea, okay, well, so what's puffing up? Two different sides of the same coin. It's like the same coin. Like this is what's so interesting about, and this, like this is what's so interesting, and what I think a lot of people already know. That when people are actually insecure, they become ridiculously arrogant. Like a lot of the most arrogant people that we see sometimes are the people who are actually just like making up for something because they feel some sort of lack, or they feel like maybe they need to like misrepresent themselves and lie. Or, you know, even the joke about like guys who drive ridiculous cars because they need to like they're hiding something or they're overcompensating for something. Of course, that's a complete generalization, not always true, but I guarantee you we either all know someone who overcompensates simply because they actually don't feel confident enough, or we do this ourselves. And I actually think we all do this at some point in our lives. And there's also varying degrees of how we do this. It may not always be so obvious that this person is like super arrogant, or that we're being super arrogant because we're actually self-conscious. Sometimes it's like, it can be so subtle. You notice that you might just tell like a little white lie, right? Because you actually feel insecure about something. Or it can be so subtle, like maybe, what's another version of like puffing up in a subtle way? Okay, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but the point that I want to make is that it's okay to notice that we do this. In fact, it's helpful and it's very loving to say that we do this, and because to deny it is then it's denial means that you stay stuck and nothing ever changes. And I think noticing is actually an act of self-compassion, because you can say like, you bring it into the light and you can give it space to like fan out, so you can finally look at what's going on and see things clearly, and nurture areas in which you are suffering so that you can no longer suffer, because that's all what we are all here to do. We are all here to experience more inner peace, whether you call it that or not, whether you know it or not. All of your actions are here because you are trying to experience more peace within. It's just sometimes we do that in ass backwards ways, or our wires get crossed, which is why, again, the person who's overcompensating by being arrogant and being cocky and being showy, that they're thinking that that's going to give them peace. And it's unconsciousness and it's misinformation, and this happens to us all the time in subtle ways, and we think that's the thing that's going to give us peace. And so we do this thing that actually is, in some way, I have a lot of compassion for this, because it's like earnestness. Like, we are all just trying to get to peace. Some of us just don't necessarily know yet the right way to go about doing it, and we are doing it in a confused way. And this is why I always say awakening is about clear seeing, and peacefulness is about clear seeing. When you finally see something clearly and you get it and you're like, oh my God, I know what I've been doing and I know what I need to do now, and everything just starts to make sense. And that is like a whole body experience where you get to be free. Okay, so I talked about shrinking. I talked a little bit about puffing up, but you know, puffing up is also just like this idea of like, let's fake it till we make it. I have some thoughts on that. I think depending on the situation, sometimes that can be helpful, but I don't think we need to fake it till we make it. We can just, what about just fully being ourselves? Just being authentically who we are. That is always so much more powerful and appealing and attractive to people. So, but puffing up is like, okay, faking it till we make it. It's, you know, overcompensating, telling little white lies. What else do we do to puff up? It's like, if we are afraid that we don't know something and we don't know enough about something, sometimes it's this energy of being like, it's almost like being like, you kind of try to fortify yourself by being like, oh, I know, like, I got this, I can do this. And this is why I want to go back to the fact that it's an energetic physical thing, because even if I don't have like examples or words to explain it, I want you to touch into your body and recognize that, like, you know how this feels, this puffing up. And if you don't know how this feels, go through your week and just start observing, where am I shrinking and where am I puffing up? Because that in itself is a very valuable practice. You will begin to become more cognizant of your body and your mind. But like, I'm trying to think of what else puffing up feels like. It just feels like you don't feel like you're enough in some way, and so therefore you need to overcompensate. And sometimes that can be like a dialogue in your head where you're kind of telling yourself God, I feel like there's so many examples of this that aren't coming to my mind right now. Meaning, I think oftentimes for me it shows up in my mind as if I need to talk myself up into being prepared for something. I need to sometimes play other things down, like, oh, this isn't a big deal, this isn't a big deal, don't worry about this thing, because I'm so desperately trying to make myself feel comfortable and safe that I'll have this internal dialogue of like almost desperately trying to make myself feel fortified. And that is like a very forceful, kind of desperate energy that is trying to puff up. But again, it's really two sides of the same coin. It's where both instances is when like we are not feeling like we are enough. And then, of course, there is something that is much more true than either of these polarities. And this is where I don't want people fucking ping-ponging around and feeling like they can only live in one space or the other. Because I see this so much, and it's like people don't know where to go. And where to go is into what Brene Brown calls your sacred space. Like, don't shrink, don't puff up, come back to your sacred space. And this is where a lot of the work lies, the opportunity lies, the magic happens. And when I say the opportunity, it means that we need to become more familiar with what our sacred space feels like. Because for some of you, if this work is new to you, you're gonna be like, I don't even know what that is. Some people like know it instantly because like, oh, I know that space. It's like when I am just calm and present and like feeling like myself. Some of it you already know what it is, you just don't necessarily have language for it and call it that, and you'll be able to observe and move through your week becoming more aware of like what your sacred space is. But like something that's really helpful and something that my clients will practice sometimes is like, they're like, okay, so I know what shrinking feels like and I know what puffing up feels like. I don't know what my sacred space feels like yet. And they say, okay, but what would it feel like if I was in my sacred space? How would I feel? What would my body, like my energy feel like? What would my vibrational vibe feel like if I was in my sacred ground? And then they get really familiar with what that feels like. So then they're learning and then they're training and becoming more familiar with what that feels like. And then it becomes more like muscle memory where they're like, oh, I know that I'm shrinking. Okay, like let me bring myself back into my sacred space. And it is like muscle memory, which is why this is something that's so kind of fun and exciting, because once you like get it, you can start practicing it and you can live more from a place of your sacred ground. Sorry, I think I called it sacred space earlier. I think the word that Brene Brown uses is sacred ground, which I like. It's like you are just grounded. So let me explain to you what my sacred ground feels like. Even if I'm insecure about something or I'm puffing up about something, if I'm misaligned in my energy, I can go like, okay, wait, I see what I'm doing. And I'll like take a deep breath and I'll come back more into the present moment and I'll be like, you know what? This is how I'm feeling. I am feeling a little bit activated and triggered right now. I'm feeling a little bit insecure, or maybe I feel a little bit unsure, and that's okay. And I can feel that way and still show up and do my best to be as honest and present as I possibly can. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling, before I was feeling insecure or shrinking or puffing up. And I'm like, my sacred ground is like, what do I do if I get to just be fully me? And oftentimes the answer is like simple. Oftentimes the answer is even just a feeling. It means that this practice is partly so that you don't have to feel anxiety all the time and feel like you're bouncing back and forth. You just get to ground back into yourself and your body and the present moment. And from that space, it's almost like all these doors open up and you know exactly how to proceed with the situation because you've also calmed down your nervous system. It's very empowering because you get yourself back into this body space of being like, oh, I can trust myself And I can be like your sacred ground space feels so good. It's like a safe space. It's like a sanctuary. It's like, this is what sovereignty feels like to me, is that I'm not being influenced by outside things at all. And I get to just be like, this is like what is showing up for me. And this is what feels like my truth and what feels true for me. And I am willing and open and perfectly happy and content to act fully from this space. And when I do this in every situation, 150% of the time, it works. So what working looks like might be different in every situation, but when I say it works, it means I'm suddenly more confident, more at ease. Like, I've stopped letting go, like needing control. I've let go of needing control. I can be open to possibility. If I'm in a uncomfortable situation, all of a sudden I'm just not as uncomfortable anymore because I've let in whatever needed to get let in, and I've released whatever needed to be released. If I'm in some kind of conflict with someone where previously I was like really puffing up and maybe being kind of like arrogant or in my head, suddenly I have like compassion for the situation, or at least patience, and I'm like, it's almost like I step out of that trance that I was previously in, and I'm like, whoa, like, okay, like I'm back, and I can see myself clearly again. Yeah, it works. And so, for example, coming back to my client who was talking about when she was shrinking with her husband, she shrinks with her husband and then she like puffs up with her kids. When she's not puffing up with her kids, and she was like, okay, let me just come back into my sacred ground. It was like, oh, she could all of a sudden listen to what her kids were telling her, not operating so much from a ego, fearful space, and be like, oh, let me like listen to what you are saying, and let's have a clear dialogue and communication, and let me be present for you. And then what happened was that whatever problem she was having with her kids then became like, they found a solution, they met in the middle, things started to get resolved because she was in her sacred ground. And your sacred ground is like what some people might call like your higher self, or just living from a place of integrity, which feels really, really good. It's like living from your heart. And then same thing with her husband. It's like when she was no longer shrinking, she wasn't puffing up either and being like, okay, yeah, here are all my demands and here are all the things that I need from you, right? Because that's the puffing up version, which is still someone who's just feeling unsafe and who's trying to get control. It's like being in your sacred ground in a situation where you previously maybe were shrinking with your partner is like, you can say with such vulnerability and show up and say, hey, this is really vulnerable for me to say, but I need this from you right now. And, it's hard for me to communicate how I feel sometimes, but this is actually how I feel and this is what I need. And I would love to have a discussion with you, or like, can you meet me here? Do you know what I mean? And then it just becomes, all of a sudden the situation's totally different. And it's two people actually connecting and working together instead of just miscommunication because there's just egos flying around. So, takeaways for you are, if this is new to you, first just begin to even notice when you are shrinking and when you are puffing up. And that in itself, that intel, just even knowing that is a very admirable, is very worthwhile. Because sometimes when we bring the unconscious to the conscious level and start seeing things clearly, that can be enough to just start, like, you're just gonna know yourself better, but you're gonna be like, oh my God, like I can start shifting the way that I am approaching these situations. And then the step after that is to become familiar with like, what is my sacred ground? And again, this might be a mental thing, like what feels like integrity with me, but it's also a physical, energetic body thing. And when I say energetic, I mean it's somatic, but it's also like your energy. Like, what energy are you generating and then bringing to the table? And for me, I like thinking about it energetically because sometimes there's no language for it. It's just a feeling. Like, you know, when all of a sudden you were like over here, over here, over here, and all for neck, and then boom, you've landed. You've like dropped in, and it's energetic sovereignty. Like, you are feeling, and this is why I love talking about sovereignty so much. You are clear, you are you, you're not being influenced by things outside of yourself. This is your lane, and you're just in your lane, and it feels good. Okay, I'm trying to think if there are any other takeaways. Energetic sovereignty. Practicing what it feels like to be in your sacred ground. Oh, right. And then that's the thing. Again, muscle memory. Over time, this becomes easier where you will get to be so like familiar with what being in your sacred ground feels like that will become more and more and more of your default. You'll just like, it's like your energy will go over here and whoop, you'll just like automatically pull yourself back. Similarly to like exercise, if anyone's ever, you know, who has experience doing some type of physical activity, whether it's like yoga or going to the gym or playing some sport, like, you know, maybe your body's like misaligned in some way, and your trainer or your yoga teacher keeps telling you like, nope, your head needs to like be in this position, or your shoulder needs to be like back and down, or whatever they might say. Or maybe you have an injury and you're like recorrecting some motion you have that was incorrect. Let's just keep like this, let's just say the shoulders down thing is something that like I feel like they say in yoga all the time. You know, previously you might be like this, but over time, muscle memory, like you're just gonna know to like auto correct and bring your shoulders back. And then you don't even have to think about it. Your body knows. This is it. This is like the thing that I want to say about all of this. Your body will know. And you will know when you are out of alignment, and you will know when how to bring yourself back and when to bring yourself back. And this, my friends, I'm telling you, feels so fucking good. It feels really good. I would like more people to have the tool and the empowerment to live this way, so that you are not, your energy isn't being divided and outsourced into other people, that you feel empowered enough and like you know what your own energy feels like, because it feels really good. All right, friends, if this is helpful, let me know. I want to know how I can help you. If you have any questions, if you're unsure about any of this, message me. Let's have a conversation. As a reminder, all of these videos that I'm doing are in celebration of Sanctuary, my new mastermind group that is starting in February. It is for women who are dedicated to this path of being free, of being sovereign, of being liberated, not just because it's for them, but because they understand, like they already know, it's very clear to you that when you are liberated, when you like know that you are taking care of yourself, it's the contribution that you make that you're like, all of us are so desperately trying to make to this whole world, because then you get to be good for your people, your work, your family, your friends, your partner, the society at large, right? Because if you are free, you free other people just in your presence, just in who you be. Oh God, I was seeing some Instagram account the other day, this guy talking about like free people. Like, yeah, what's his name? He's great. This guy on Instagram, he's talking about hurt people, free people. And it's really like that simple. But also like, anyway, so about the mastermind, starts in February. I'm looking for a couple women who are like, they know they want to prioritize their inner peace. They know that this work is really important to them, and they want to do this in community with other women who are on the same path. The way that the mastermind is going to work is it's going to be an intimate space where we are collaborating together, working things through together. I will be mentoring you and supporting you, but also you will have the support of other women. And I have learned that magical things happen when women come together in their full power to support one another. And that transformation happens, whatever transformation it is that you might be looking for. So at the core of everything that you're trying to transform is your spiritual work. It's not the surface stuff. Your spiritual work is the core, the foundation that then blasts out and affects and touches every part of your life, because it's all about what's happening in here and in here and in your body. Woo! All right, that was a fun one. you can apply to work with me in Sanctuary via the link in my bio. I don't know if I can link it in here. I don't think I can, but link in my bio, and also you can just DM me if you have questions, but I guess the quickest way would just be to apply. All right. Bye, friends.